Thank you so much, Professor von Braun, for your lucid and precise intervention. I'd like to open it up for questions. And Professor Livland first, please.
Very much. I was wondering, do you account in your projections for the future for air pollution? And this is not only negative. For example, ozone can cause crop loss, like maize and soy crops, but also it can have positive effects, like bringing nutrients, nitrogen, reactive nitrogen, and maybe even phosphorus. And so my question, do you account for that?
The soil degradation map, which I showed you, is corrected for fertilization effect, nitrogen fertilization effects. So yes, there we have a positive, and it's quite significant in some of the 500,000 pixels which make up this map.
Virgilio.
Congratulations for a very nice and clear presentation. I share very much your call for the transformation of the whole economy beyond adaptation and mitigation. I think that's the way to go. I have just a question about this now common vision that intensification of livestock is necessarily a positive move. There has been very interesting new studies and debate around this. And those studies have challenged the assumption that increasing productivity reduces demand for new cropland and thereby becomes a disincentive for deforestation. Well, that is only true if the demand is not increasing. Since the demand is increasing for meat, then what happens is that in many cases, farmers profit more from intensification of livestock production systems, and thereby they have more cash, and having more cash, that means more investment in expansion of the frontier at the expense of natural ecosystems. So I'd just like to share that with you and hear your thoughts on this, because I think it's a very widespread concept that intensification is good, but that's not necessarily the case, especially in areas such as the Amazon. And I would just complement this question to ask your opinion whether or not, instead of calling for intensification, we should make a call for switching diets from cattle meat to fish, because I think fish production can be better for the environment and better for health as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Aquaculture is the fastest growing animal protein production in the world currently, and fortunately also in Africa. I think we need a switch and a productivity increase in each of the animal production sectors. And we need the new protein strategy, all of that. In particular, in the red meat production, we need prices that cover all indirect costs. Currently, the environmental degradation effects are not priced in completely, including the indirect land use effects and the climate change effects are not factored into what consumers pay. The word consumer is as she is or he is, so we need to make sure that we manage transition to a more sustainable animal products sector by efficient plant and livestock breeding strategies, so the feed and the animals themselves, and That's what I mean by intensification. So on the both on the breeding and the production side, we need to be as efficient as possible. I think there is tremendous hunger for getting out of traditional meat consumption in parts of the global middle class. Otherwise, it's inexplainable why so many people are eager to learn about alternatives to current types of meats.
Professor Al-Danaimi.
So one of the things I was looking for is about food waste. So 40% of what is produced ends up in the garbage, which produces the cycle of methane and others. Is there a way to address this by making food more expensive according to the income of countries? And we have economists who can work that out. Is that a way or to address it with the agriculture?
Yeah, I didn't want to repeat something which I've said in this room a year ago here on food waste, but yes, it's part of the story. We have waste and losses, and according to the rough estimates, they are both roughly 30%. The waste in the rich world and the losses in the poor world. They need to be addressed by completely different instruments. A lot of investment is needed for storage, processing, on-field loss reduction in the poorer world's agriculture and food system. And the losses relate to management of waste, behavioral change, incentives to not throw food away, and mass mobilization. So these, however, must not be expected to do the trick that we come quickly to a sustainable food system. We need to work on the waste and loss front as well as at the productivity and production front. The behavioral change goes awfully slowly, and the massive capital investment needed to reduce losses on fields and in storage and in processing in developing countries also does not move very fast.
Professor Jos Schellenhuber.
Thank you for pronouncing my name correctly, which is a challenge, I know. Now, I just would like to make a remark. I have several questions, but maybe this is more for working towards the declaration in the end, which we want to achieve. I think what you mentioned, Professor von Braun, on the transformation is too good to be lost in discussion, whatever. I think it's really important, because I said this also in this room last year and before. We have to be careful not to get in a mode of problem hopping, so to speak. Yeah? So climate change is a problem, let's address it. Air pollution is a problem, let's address it. Industrial agriculture is a problem, let's address it. And we hop on and always try to repair things. Yeah? But what we need is a systems notion, a systems vision, and also a positive narrative. And in a way, we are now embarking either on the degradation of this planet or a sustainability revolution, where everything is really linked to each other. So I think it's extremely important to bring that out, because in the end it turns out we are somehow embarked on the wrong train after the Second World War, with lifestyle which is making us sick actually. It's destroying the ecosystems of its planet and so on. So I think it's really all about the transformation, and the transformation is circular economy, better lifestyles, decency for our fellow creatures and everything. So I think if not here at the Pontifical Academy in a declaration, where else should we emphasize this? So I really fully support your idea of a transformation and a holistic view of the future. Thank you.
Well, if I may share, okay. Add a word on that. I think there is also an increased receptiveness for the thoughts which I had summarized at the end on transformation towards a sustainable economic system. We monitor how many countries give themselves new strategies around a bio-based economy or bioeconomy and a circular economy. And those were very few 6 years ago, but there are very many now, more than 50. I was hesitating to put a map with flags of countries which have written themselves such strategies lately. So the idea that the city needs to be completely differently configured has been raised in this room yesterday already. That's not only the notion in China and India, but also in rapidly urbanizing parts of Africa. So thank you for underlining that point, and I'm happy if Ram is not yet too tired of revisions with the declaration to put a sentence in there.
Sir Andrew.
Thanks, and thanks again for a great talk, which I think covered a lot of ground. I wanted to ask you, though, about fruit and vegetables, because you talked about staple crops, extremely important, but for health, fruit and vegetables are also very important because they're major protective factors against heart disease and a range of other non-communicable diseases. We've been doing some recent work looking at multiple environmental stressors on yield and nutritional quality of fruit and vegetables and showing that climate change and a whole range of other environmental changes can affect both yield and in some cases quality as well. So I wanted to ask you whether you factored fruit and vegetable production into your work. It's very important because there's an underconsumption of fruit and vegetables, particularly in low-income countries, and that will have profound implications for health now and in the future.
Thank you. This modeling exercise which I presented does not factor in fruits and vegetables. We are, however, in a very serious situation with increasing fruit and vegetable prices, relative prices, compared to the staple food prices. If you trace the effects of the so-called green revolution, especially in Asia, had beautiful positive effects driving down cereal prices. Rice has become cheaper, wheat has become cheaper, corn, etc. But the relative and absolute prices of vegetables and fruits have gone up, up, and up, and out of that come unhealthy diets, and especially among the poor. So this whole healthy diet issue needs to be addressed not only on a behavioral side, eat more fruits and vegetables. How can you afford it? You cannot. The bottom 20% in Asia cannot afford the fruit and vegetable prices and cannot store them. So that's where the whole biofortification agenda comes in, so get micronutrients in staple foods, but also the reconfiguration of food subsidy systems. Staple foods are subsidized in India and were for a long time in China, but not fruits and vegetables. So I belabor your point, but I think we need to get very serious about making healthy diet available for the poor, and that requires investments in fruits and vegetables.
Thank you so much. We have 4 questions, and to stay in time, please keep the questions brief and to the point. Professor Frumkin, Dr. Van Susteren, Professor Farrar, and Professor Kamen.
Thank you very much. Thank you for an excellent talk. We've referred several times to behavior change as a part of changing consumption patterns. I'm struck by how difficult that is because food preferences are so deeply woven into culture and into personal levels of comfort. The foods that I prefer are the foods that my mother and my grandmother served me, and they have a sort of wholesomeness to them that makes it difficult to change preferences. What do we know about changing food preferences in consumers, say changing away from comfort foods like meat and possibly changing toward the adoption of innovative foods like insect-based proteins to move toward more sustainable dietary preference patterns?
Mm-hmm. The preference change seems to be easier with an urbanized population. Trend setting helps. I'm chairing a group on sustainable consumption, which includes in the German science advisory body. But we have far too little hard evidence with experimental designs. So we are advocating, and it is written in the new strategy of German science ministry, to have large-scale experiments where the whole counties or cities cooperate in that respect. An interesting anecdote is that many people may say yuck to insects and so on, but last year at the high-tech fair on computer innovations in Hanover, the main food served over lunch was insects, grilled insects, and people were happily eating them and with curiosity and appetite.
Perhaps we'll take the last three questions, and I remember when Monsignor Sanchez Orondo visited Mexico, where they served us ants, Monsignor, you might remember, and they were pretty tasty. But you need a lot of tequila first, and then they taste marvelous. We have Dr. Van Susteren, Dan Kamen, and then Dr. Farrar, please. Let's ask all three questions, and then Professor von Braun can respond.
I'm sure Professor Sachs will back me up on this, I hope he will anyway, that the UN has said that for world health, transition to a plant-based diet is absolutely essential. And when we adopt it, of course, it does set the trend, the social norm, and I'm wondering if we can think about including that in our declaration. That's one thing. And then I wanted to ask the following question. There's a metric, at least, that's been around for a while that in a fully regenerated soil, that 1 acre of fully regenerated soil will draw down 1 ton of carbon in 1 year. Can you comment on the capacity of fully regenerated soil to do such things?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to congratulate you on doing the energy food connection, because I do think that we are underestimating the ability to think about local distributed energy as a way to cut food waste, to empower communities. And I was wondering if you would be willing, as president of PASS, to elevate this to something that would be called for here as an area of research and activism, because while there are grants and things available, it's an area that cuts strongly across our understanding of food, energy, and of engaging communities. And it's not something that research agencies around the world are very good at making a call for.
The issue of the declaration has come up, and I appreciate people do not quite rightly want wordsmithing, but I would just encourage those who are going to be responsible for it to be absolutely ruthlessly focused on what the message is and what message and who the audience is, because I fear that if we keep adding sentences, then we will be producing a declaration which is all things to all people, but actually speaks to no one. And I would really encourage a ruthless focus on who the audience is and what the messages are. And I know this is a complex area, but to try and bring some clarity and simplicity and an avenue through to which the declaration can have an impact, because otherwise it will just be another declaration.
On the last point, I'm totally with you. So far there is a sentence in there related to my talk, or this issue, that the global food system is at risk of getting destabilized, and we see signs of that, and that affects billions. But where we are not ruthless enough, please send us messages to cut and not to add. Ram will appreciate that. On the energy issue, yes, I think to address energy not in isolation, but in the nexus to land use, food and water, and we will have a water presentation later, I think is essential. And this is a theme for an academy, because academies are good at bringing different disciplines together. And I appreciate your suggestion. On the soil question, yes, the potentials are tremendous. The 4 per million initiative means if we at 0.4% carbon into soils, we deal with the whole sequestration issue. And you don't need to do anything else. That's a technical calculation, was at in the margins of the Paris COP a major topic. But I put a grain of salt on this soil idea because of the complicated issue of soil moisture management and increased dryness. So climate change is risking to drive out this opportunity the longer we wait in many parts of the world. So thank you.